What is up, SkinClub community? Elfishguy back once again with another video for you exclusively on the SkinClub platforms. It is major time, so I think it's a good time to highlight one of Asia's best up-and-coming teams. If the jersey didn't give it away, it's Tyloo, a team which I believe could be the Chinese equivalent of the Mongolz. Now, that's a pretty bold statement, but I do think that this team could potentially be the next big thing coming out from Asia, in that they're going to be able to capture the hearts and minds of their countrymen, push the scene forward, and obviously be a big asset to the Asia-Pacific region as a whole. Now, this may end up looking very silly depending on how they do at the major, but I did actually end up having them as my 3-0 pick for Stage 1, and I kind of low-key think that they could make it through to Stage 3. So we'll see how this plays out. But here's my argument. I think they've got, finally, the perfect blend of players with the youth, the experience, the playmakers, the supportive elements. They've got that X factor in Jamyoung. They've got the IGL starting to come through and look good finally as well. They've really been trying to find this special sauce. They've been shuffling their roles around for the better part of 12 months. And I think they've finally found that mix now that they've kind of been looking for, that's going to allow them to go to that next level and be an internationally competitive team, right? It's been a long process for Tyloo as an organization, and it's been a long while without any success as well. And I think hopefully we've got to that point now where it's actually going to start to happen, and we don't have to keep talking about potential, and we can start talking about actual results. But yeah, when it comes to potential, I think we have to touch on Jamyoung, Mosea, and Mercury first. This was the trio that was initially scouted by Advent when he was the IGL of the team back in the Vici and Rare Adam days. Obviously Vici for Jamyoung, as he came in first initially, and then Mosea and Mercury were brought in later under the Rare Adam banner. But all three became pretty integral, and I would argue actually probably the most important parts of the roster, which has eventually morphed into the Tyloo of today. And when I talk about the core of the roster, it is these three guys that I am kind of focusing on. First and foremost, I think the biggest impact, or the most important aspect of Tyloo's potential rise into this Mongolz of the future type scenario, is that Mercury has moved into the in-game leadership role, and he's this unlikely hero for Tyloo in maybe the same sense that someone like Brolin was for Mongolz. You know, initially when he joined this team in Rare Adam, he was kind of praised for his mechanical skill, and he was dubbed this future star. I don't think many people would have really looked at him and been too enthused about the possibility of him being an IGL, but his value as an IGL in a world where it seemed like there was no good options actually can't really be understated. Only very recently taken over the role, in 2025, at the start of 2025, as far as I know. It was after Extremesland when Mercury actually ended up taking on the role of the in-game leader. But he's someone that has trained under Advent, and he's got this strong guiding hand in the likes of Zoking and Kami with their coaching presence. Those two have been around this roster for a very, very long time, and they're helping him to kind of build this Tyloo system. And they've been able to make Tyloo look like a real counterstrike team for the first time in years, right? It's actually been really, really impressive, the transformation that we've seen from the style of the Tyloo gameplay. But obviously, it's still early days, right? So the signs are positive for Mercury, and whether or not he could be the solution to Tyloo's post-Advent IGL problems, I guess still remains to be seen. But at least from what we've seen so far in 2025, we have to look at that and say it's been positive signs. Mosea as well, I don't think anyone has anything bad to really say about him. He's Mr. Consistent. He's the guy that can kind of always be relied upon to do his job, and every team really needs a player like him. He's like that glue guy. Everyone likes to use that terminology, glue guy. He's also the player that seems to kind of drop off the least in big matches and international events and stuff like that, which helps to sort of provide this little rock for the team to kind of operate around. The likes of Jamyoung and G, obviously the guys that we look to really bring that map winning performance, can be a little bit more in flux, but Mosea is always sort of dropping around a 1 to 1.1 kind of a rating on any given map, and he's always having his impact, which is really nice. Then of course you have to talk about Jamyoung, who is that guy. Jamyoung is him. He's been that player that's been turning heads ever since he joined in Vici Gaming initially, and he does bring that star power that any team, I think, in this day and age of Counter-Strike does kind of need to step up in the big moments. Now, he's finally broken the shackles, obviously, of being the IGL in that post-Advent world, now that Mercury has stepped in there. I think his individual level has seen a bit of an uptick as a result. Also, he seems to really be benefiting from the stability that Tyloo have now found, right? When they were swapping around players, bouncing up and down, he was obviously in-game leading, and then sometimes Mosea was in-game leading, and you had ZDR in, you had Lyrics in, you had this and that. That didn't seem like a really good situation for Jamyoung. I think we didn't see his best throughout 2024. But here in 2025, you go back and look at what he was able to do at ESL Pro League Season 21, particularly in the initial stage, more so rather than Stage 2. I think that's kind of indicative of what we can hope to see from him at this Austin Major, and hopefully going deeper into 2026 as well, as he starts to get, his legs, basically, when it comes to international Counter-Strike. Because let's be real, Jamyoung's been around for a very long time, but a lot of the time he hasn't actually been given the opportunity to play at a lot of the big events. If you actually go back and look at, his history as a player, he hasn't ever played a major, for example. He hasn't been at a lot of these big events, largely because a lot of those positions were taken away by the likes of Rare Adam and Invision. So he's still got a lot of upside, I think. Then we come to G, obviously, and he's someone that has always been a bit more of an under fire AWPer in the Chinese scene. You know, someone that's been somewhat overlooked in favor of the bigger names like Zaka and Kaze in the past. And he's finally finding his feet in what is starting to look like the best period of his career thus far. I mean, alongside Mosea, he's only 20 years old, right? Those two guys very, very young. So the upside for players like G and Mosea, who are both really, like, let's be real, only just starting their career, would be potentially quite massive for Chinese CS. On top of that as well, he's obviously somewhat of a fan favorite, you know, so you're starting to bring fans in internationally and domestically, which is bringing more fans to the game in China and more international interest in Tyloo when they play internationally. Finally, of course, there is Attacker, who kind of feels like the odd man out in this team. He's the only player from a previous generation of CS, and frankly, I was kind of surprised to see him as an addition to the team. I almost thought that Orman was going to be a bit of a better option in this roster, and I honestly felt like this addition of Attacker was like kind of only going to really be temporary for like a tournament or two. But in spite of that, he's actually had enough solid matches where you kind of start to wonder if they should maybe just be keeping him long term. And I think they have kind of made that decision to do so. And he's obviously going to be the guy that will take this team through to at least the major, and then who knows what happens. I think a lot of that will depend on what occurs here at the Austin Major and potentially what those results look like as to whether or not there's going to be a change in this team. But I think he at least has done enough to change his playstyle himself as a player over the course of his career, and he's now found himself like doing the anchor work for the Stars of Tomorrow, which he's doing a surprisingly good job of. His tenacity and his clutch factor have been a big reason why Tyloo have been on the rise lately. You look at a lot of different games and he's, you know, pulling off 2v1 clutches, or he's finding a nice double kill or something like that, as, you know, he's like the sole anchor on a bomb site when the rotation is coming in. He's doing a lot of good stuff, and he's obviously also bringing like this welcome level of experience into a team of youngsters. So I'm surprisingly saying this, but I think he's actually quite an important piece of the puzzle for this Tyloo roster. Anyway, the point is, for a Tyloo which looked like it wasn't going to even exist at the end of 2024, you talk about Jamyoung and how he had all those rumors about going to Valorant, wasn't playing the game for a little while. You know, they've only really properly settled on a roster as of like February this year, because again, if you go back to Extremesland, Orman was playing at that event. They've finally now qualified for a major. It's kind of crazy to think that Jamyoung, Mosea, and Mercury had never played a major before, but here we are. I mean, this is a team with all the potential in the world, and it's the team that we as Asian CS fans have been kind of like waiting for the better part now of 2 years. And I think that was even since before Mongolz was really on the radar. People were looking at the core of this Chinese roster and saying, okay, Jamyoung, Mosea, and Mercury, they could be like that next Asian team to push the region into, you know, some kind of highlight or whatever. It didn't end up necessarily happening because of all this roster shambles that they've kind of been happening. But now we're at that point where it seems like they finally get to have their time in the sun. So could they be another team to fly the flag in Asia in the same way that the Mongolz has done? Well, I think that's a pretty bold statement, a bold dream. And maybe they can't reach like the same heights, right? You know, to predict that they're going to be a top 5 team in the world, I think is a bit dramatic. But I do think that they're going to be at least able to become a mainstay on the international circuit throughout the later stages of 2025 and beyond, and bring some more interest from the Chinese community. Time will tell.